So welcome to the VAYA Space podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Dawn Mooney, and I'm so excited because this is the first episode in this podcast. And I'm thrilled to introduce you to our two guests today, Jack Blood, who is the Chief Revenue Officer for VAYA Space, and Chad Ives, who is the Sales Director for C8 Secure. And we're talking about C8 Secure and VAYA Space. We're discussing cybersecurity and turnkey solutions, a very exciting partnership. So thank you both for being with me today.
Thank you, Michelle.
It's good to be here, Michelle.
Well, before we dive in, let's get to know you a little bit better. So can you please give me a background for both of you, Jack and Chad?
I have a background in aerospace and defense, working for strategics like Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, L3, primarily in the program management and business development and strategy arenas. And an opportunity came to join this team at VAYA. I saw the benefits of the technology and jumped on board.
Yeah, so my experience goes back, or dates back, I should say, about 18 or 19 years at this point. Time just really flies. Always been in technology my entire professional life, post-military. Always been in the service industry on the technology side. And up to now, I've been at cloud companies, security companies, but always been service-based, and C8 Secure falls right into that same realm. Working with a great crew over here. We've got a company behind us that's really dedicated to doing this the best that we possibly can. So happy to be here, Michelle.
Yeah, really happy to have both of you here. So now that we've learned a little bit about both of you individually, let's talk about the companies that you represent before we go into the topic at hand. So Jack, what makes VAYA unique?
The thing that makes VAYA unique is that we use the equivalent of 20 metric tons of recycled thermoplastics. That's the equivalent of more than 2 million plastic bottles that get recycled into a high energy rocket fuel. And so we're helping mankind by taking plastics on the planet off the planet and converting it into a rocket fuel to put satellites into orbit. And we do it as a greener alternative to traditional rockets that are out there right now, putting out less greenhouse gas emissions, zero black carbon soot, and doing it cheaper and more reliably than current technology that's in use.
All right, Chad, it's your turn. So what makes C8 secure?
So C8 Secure, let me just start out by saying C8 Secure is completely focused as a cybersecurity services company. So that said, C8 Secure was born with the concept of taking the very best technologies in the cybersecurity world that we could find as a company and applying them to our services. So when I say applying them to our services, I'm referring to the people behind the scenes, our Security Operations Center, our SOC up in Virginia. So what do I think, going in that same direction, what do I think makes us unique is, number one, our SOC, but number two, when we're talking with our partners and customers like VAYA Space, it really revolves a lot around what we're bringing to the table around regulation and compliancy, our experience in helping customers and partners deal with that, with the use of technology, and specifically in this case, the security aspect of it. So as I mentioned, C8 Secure was born with that in mind. Number one, to help our current customers of our parent company, Continent 8 Technologies, and ultimately using that same concept to expand out further into the enterprise space. So the unique pieces of it being the people behind the scenes, those that are reacting if a bad actor happens to get past the technology piece. And we all know nothing is 100%, right? There are going to be some things that happen, and it's really those times that are the most critical, in that the people that are helping, evaluating, and doing the remediation behind the scenes are the most critical piece of any cybersecurity solution. So the second piece of what makes C8 Security unique, as I said, is the helping our customers and our partners with the compliance. So our parent company, Continent 8 Technologies, has 20 plus years in the business of helping their customers through heavy and very complex regulation. And therefore, C8 Secure also has about 20 plus years and doing the same thing.
So, Jack, let me ask you this. We are talking about very technical process, and we all know the phrase, well, it's not rocket science, but it literally is. That's what we're talking about, a big portion of this. So because of this, because it's so complex, especially when it comes to maintaining a certain level of security that, of course, you want to give your customers, tell us about this collaboration, Jack.
Well, we started out actually looking at C8 Secure to provide cybersecurity solutions for us as a company. And the more I learned about the product, the more I learned about the organization, their approaches, the more I realized that they were a potential customer in that as well, in that their parent company, Continent 8, operates over 80 advanced data centers globally. And when we started talking about things that we both could benefit from each other, by us providing fulfillment to Michael Tobin's vision to take some of these data centers into low Earth orbit with significant improvement in transaction latency and the time it takes to transmit data back and forth, and also providing physical security by it not being susceptible to transoceanic cables, info security through their own internal processes. We realized that this was something unique that hadn't really been combined yet, and that the space industry really needed. Recent world events have shown the susceptibility, the vulnerability to these data networks. The most vulnerable thing, of course, is the ground stations as they uplink and downlink information from satellites. And in fact, that happened in Eastern Europe, where these ground stations were jammed by an adversary. And in this, we're talking about commercial assets that were jammed. So our government has a lot more robust protocols in place, but that hasn't really made its way to the commercial environment yet the way that it needs to. So it really drove home the fact that this was not just a marriage of convenience, but really we had a chance to disrupt the market by offering C8 Secure cybersecurity solutions along with VAYA Space's sustainable, affordable, and safe access to space. And that if we package that together, our customers would benefit from it.
Yeah. And Chad, can you give us some insight with traditional approaches, why they may or may not work? And then what Jack talked about, not just a marriage of convenience, how this step to connect C8 Secure will help VAYA better serve its customers.
Yeah. So let me, if I could, Michelle, let me answer the second question first. So what the partnership really provides for us is the ability for us and for partners and customers to be proactive with their security projects and what they're facing from a cybersecurity perspective. And what I mean by that is if you think about just traditional security, if we're looking terrestrial, just here on Earth, cybersecurity is very complex. It's already very difficult to maneuver, whether that's just standard security, and then when you layer on things like compliancy, things like regulation. For example, any customer, any federal agency and those contractors and subcontractors working and providing for those federal agencies is going to be required to have a certain level of cybersecurity compliance under CMMC, which is a compliance certification. And ultimately, CMMC is going to be dictated by what's called NIST framework. NIST is the National, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but so many acronyms out there, National Institute for Standards and Technology. And specifically within NIST 800-177. And I don't want to get too deep into the regulations, but it really just points to the complexity of what we're dealing with. Because now, not just terrestrial, now we got to add this security to something that's number one in space. Number two, it could be constantly moving, a constantly moving target. And there's things like radiation and all those unknowns that we don't want to make too many assumptions on these things. So it allows us to be proactive in that if you think about the sheer complexity of what we're looking at here, any time that you can be proactive about meeting those requirements, you've got to take advantage of that. What I mean by proactive is if you look at just the sheer complexities of security and ultimately security in space, being able to be proactive is, I think it would be obvious to anybody. You want to be as proactive as you possibly can. So going back to trying not to make too many assumptions as we are dealing with the complexities of space, VAYA and C8 Secure are currently working with a customer to implement our cybersecurity services into a sandbox environment to do some pre-testing with the ultimate goal of using some of this particular partner's resources on the International Space Station so we can do an actual real-life test of our security solution actually in space to identify, are there hiccups? Are there hurdles that we're not seeing? What do we need to do? How is the environment different? How does it react to things like radiation and constant movement? So we are trying not to make too many assumptions and, moving ahead with actual research and real live testing.
Some aspects of that are really taking edge computing to the final frontier, literally, with in-space data centers, and again, there's a lot of opportunity here, and we think that together, C8 Secure and VAYA Space are going to be able to offer these solutions to our customers.
So, with new technological innovations, especially in the space industry, there's a lot of excitement there, but we talked about, especially with security, because that's what we're basically talking about today. Chad, let's dive a little deeper. If you can fill us in on what C8 Secure has been seeing when talk about those hiccups, the current threat assessments, increased vulnerabilities that we see in the space industry. Fill us in on just how important it is to be proactive, what you said before, because of what we are seeing and those potentials to derail a company and so much more.
Yeah, so we have seen some events fairly recently, as a matter of fact, with some space companies, specifically satellites, getting some bad actors that have been able to infiltrate. And as of right now, all the bad actors out there, it's typically going to happen terrestrial. And what I mean by that is it's going to happen from here in the ground. They're going to access it through some way, whether that's pre-launch, whether that's through a transmission up to a satellite, et cetera. That's how it's typically going to happen now. But that doesn't mean in the future, some of these bad actors out there are pretty complex, and they're going to figure out a way over time how to infiltrate a satellite that's already in space. It's just going to happen. That said, what we're trying to do, and I'll go back to, the sandbox and the real world testing, is we're going to try to figure out how can we keep those type of actors from accessing a satellite already in space, but also at the same time, how do we keep them out of using the tools that we have available? How do we keep them out of the terrestrial aspect and everything in between?
At the end of the day, security is, of course, at the forefront of both companies working together to ensure that security is at a top-notch level. But let's talk about cost, because cost is a huge component of this. How will this partnership work to make things more cost-effective for companies looking to have affordable access to space?
So from the VAYA Space aspect of this, although we did not have first mover advantage in the market, Elon Musk and SpaceX had that, and then followed by Pete Beck and Rocket Lab. What we found with our new Vortex hybrid technology is we can produce these engines significantly cheaper than any alternative that's available. So that gives us a low cost advantage. And with that low cost advantage, we can bundle services to further magnify the value proposition. So not only can we give cheaper access to space on either a per cost per kilogram basis or a launch vehicle within the small lift, higher capacity market sector, but by bundling things like C8 Secure cybersecurity solutions, bundling other teammates that we are both working with, we can get economies of scale and then pass that on to our customers.
Yeah, and I'll add something to that if I could, Michelle, that I really look at it as there's really, when you're talking about cost, there's really two types. There's the dollars, and then there's the cost of not doing it. So let me just start with the dollars. And, Jack, it was a good segue into my thoughts on that is that, you've got, and I keep going back to the word being proactive, right? It's going to cost a lot less to do it in the development of your payload, of the rocket, of the satellite, than it's going to be reactive, trying to do it when it's already there, number one. Number two is the cost, not necessarily in dollars, but the cost of not doing it early in the development stage, in that these bad actors that have already gotten to some of these satellites, it's because they didn't have proper security deployed already, and they found a way to get in there. That said, being proactive about and doing these things once again in the development stage, prior to ever even thinking about them being launched into space, is going to be the best possible way, from both a dollars and from an opportunity cost, to keep the bad actors out.
So how do you see this joint venture affecting the market? Is this a game changer when it comes to the space industry and cybersecurity?
Absolutely, Michelle. We already anticipated we were going to disrupt the launch services sector of the market. But when we bundle these services together in this turnkey solution with C8 Secure, we're absolutely going to add significant value. And we're doing something right now that's not being offered to the space industry, not just with our propulsion technology, but with the cybersecurity solutions that C8 Secure provides.
So as we're wrapping up here, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. And I would like to reiterate, as I've said numerous times throughout the podcast, that I think being proactive is critical. There's regulations, there's compliances. You've got the unknowns of space that you're dealing with. Being proactive is absolutely critical to making and building the right solution that's going to stop those bad actors from getting in. Number two, addressing things like cost that we just spoke about, finding partners and vendors out there like the VAYA Spaces of the world that are thinking about you when it comes to putting together solutions that are going to answer a lot of these questions for you already, is also critical. So reach out to partners like that who are in the know, who are already putting together and thinking ahead, and trying to attack these hurdles before they happen.
And of course, things are changing virtually every day as technology progresses. I would invite all of the viewers to follow our companies on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and to visit our websites.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Jack Blood, Chief Revenue Officer, VAYA Space, and Chad Ives, Sales Director for C8 Secure. Pleasure to have you both, and a lot of information on the table, a lot of excitement with what's happening with security in the space industry. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here today.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in today. We are excited to have this as the first episode of the VAYA Space podcast, and some great information here. If you would like more information, you can go to vayaspace.com or C8 as the number 8 secure.com. That's C8 Secure.com. You can find information on both companies there. And we hope that you will tune into the next episode of the VAYA Space podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Dawn Mooney. Thanks for joining us once again. We hope to see you soon.